Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Cradle News Roundup, your one-stop shop for all news West Asia. My name is Esteban Carrillo. I am the news editor for the Cradle, and as usual, I'm joined by my colleagues, content creator and writer for the Cradle, Karim Shami, and back with us after a few weeks' absence, a columnist and editor for the Cradle, Sharmeen Narwani. And before we start, we just want to make sure to remind you to leave a like, to share this video, to subscribe to our channel, to find us on our other social media platforms, and above all, to check out our Patreon, where you can become a supporter of the Cradle. So this week, with Charmin back, I know she has some news for us. So without much preamble, I'm just gonna give up the floor over to you to let us know exactly what's coming next for the Cradle.
Well, Cradle viewers, the Cradle is expanding. We started 3.5 years ago. Then about 2 years ago, we launched the Cradle Arabic. Arabic is set to do an expansion. We're going to have a podcast, a regular podcast like the English version in Arabic soon, with a different format. They'll have analysts that swing in and out initially. But I think the big news is in about a week or so, I mean, starting this week, today actually, we are launching the Cradle Turkey. And I think possibly the timing is crazy because of what's happening in Turkey right now. Um, we're obviously, in the roll up to the launch of the Cradle Turkey site. We've gotten very close with our Turkish editor-in-chief and staff, who have been populating the site with news articles, even though it's not out yet, so that when you go to the site on day one, there will be stuff on it. And all that's going on in Turkey is regarding the Istanbul mayor Imamoglu's arrest and the incarceration, the arrests, and harassment of journalists. I mean, that's literally nobody's paying attention to anything else. And it's snowballing. So we know from our Turkish staff that that Erdogan, the president of Turkey, decided to do 9-day holiday for the Eid, which is over and beyond anything. I mean, the most sort of, determined states, countries, Muslim countries do 3 days. He's doing 9 days. It's a political decision. He's never done this before, 9 days to get people to go back to their hometowns, out of the cities, etc., hoping that demonstrations will start to, to
Die
cease.
down. Yeah.
It die down, yeah. And that may not happen because, these same people from Istanbul, Ankara, etc., going back to their hometowns. I mean, demonstrations could spill across the country, but we'll see. I mean, it is, like I said, all that our Turkish staff are talking about now in our private conversations. And of course, it's so complicated, right? Like the archaic rules and regulations and laws that the Erdogan government is using to detain people on trumped up charges, unproven things. I mean, the rule of law is no longer in Turkey.
This brings to mind, and I think it's a good point to start and well, remind the viewers, check out the Cradle Turkey, because really we couldn't have planned it better with everything that's happening. But it brings to mind, what happened in Pakistan a couple of years ago. I don't know if you guys will agree with me, with Imran Khan, with this intense persecution of the most popular party in Pakistan, the most popular leader in Pakistan, a legislative coup. What Erdogan is doing here, it's, I don't know, again, if you guys agree with me, I do think of it as a form of a coup. This is kind of clearing the way for the elections. From what some commentary that I read, it might be possible that what he wants and what the opposition want at this point as well is anticipated elections, right? Snap elections to kind of secure his power down the line. But it feels like it's happening more and more these days, in which we see these leaders, particularly aligned with the U.S., kind of attempt to seize power by any means necessary. Like I said, Pakistan, a great recent example. I would even say Israel, an interesting example. What's happening there internally, right, with Netanyahu and the Shin Bet chief and the DA. and all of that political maneuver that is meant to shield this highly unpopular leader. Erdogan, Turkey is a member of NATO, the second largest army in NATO. Now Europe, right? Europe wants to rearm, and they're no longer in good terms with the
Mm,
United States, and all of a sudden Turkey, again, is becoming a bit like the belle of the ball, right? Because all of a
mm,
sudden Turkey has an arms industry that can provide to Europe, and Europe is saying, oh, maybe we will dust off those, membership documents that you submitted many years ago for the EU, and that dangle them in
mm.
front of your face. So how does this fit in, right? What's happening? Because as you said, Charmaine, thousands of arrests. Last time I checked, it was at least 2,000, including dozens of journalists, many of them are foreign journalists. The Turkish lira has dropped. Last week, it dropped significantly to its
Mm.
lowest point since the 2008 crisis. So it's a very difficult situation. What's happening right now? What do you think the international community has to say about what's happening in Turkey?
Well, the international community, which is Western nations basically, is very self-serving and cherry picks the topics it wants to focus on. You would expect more media headlines. This is a NATO partner, one of the early NATO
Yes,
members,
very early. Mhm.
the NATO's biggest land army, and sitting between Asia and Europe, where a lot's going on right now. It's a country that has some clout, being a Muslim country, um, in the region, in West Asia, on the Gaza issue, for instance, which it is not. It's not applied pressures as it could. It's also a player in the Ukraine theater. You know, Turkey, as we have seen in Cradle coverage since our inception, swings like a pendulum. One moment it looks very much like a Eurasian player, the next moment it looks like a NATO player. And
Mhm.
of course, the Turks are now hightailing it to Washington to try to get the F-35 fighter jet program launched again, which I think brings something like $9 or $12 billion, I can't recall, to the Turkish economy, even though the plane is a dud, and this according to American military experts. So, it's an important country, but of course the headlines are not there. They're on Iran's violations of everything.
Yeah.
And I watched the last 3 podcasts from where I was, and I felt like, you know, I wanted to inject a large picture perspective into the discussions we're having, because every day things are happening in this region, every hour. It's hard to keep up with the developments. We do, and it just seems then you're chasing the next development. But sometimes it's important to pull back. You were talking about, Esteban, about how um, countries like Turkey are reacting so fascistically. Okay.
Mhm.
We were talking about their complete violations of their own domestic laws. And of course we see the Americans violating their own domestic laws, and we see the Israelis violating their domestic laws. We see the British doing it. We see
Mhm.
people doing this all over, but where in Pakistan, okay, as well. Of course, the people backing the coup against Imran Khan were pro-US. Okay,
Yes.
and he fingered the US in this plot to unseat him. It is one camp that is breaking laws all over the place. If they were so victorious, what's their crazy rush? What's with, the mass aggressions on every front, the threats on every front, the warfare on every front? Why is a victorious party or bloc acting this rashly? And I want to point out something. I don't know if viewers will agree or not with me, but I, urge you to take what I'm saying now and look at it months and even years down the line. You have to look at the bigger picture. The reason they're acting so rashly is because their order is completely fraying. It has been before this, the Ukraine war started, before the Gaza war started. it started fraying in the early days of the Syrian war. It started becoming apparent that it was fraying. Syria drew in the major powers, which no conflict had done since the Cold War ended, right? And then it became the great game at play again. And with every passing year, the Russians and the Chinese and even the Iranians were gaining stature, right? And gave a sense that there was a new power block on the global stage, which gave, I guess, incentive for countries like the African Sahel region. It gave incentive for countries like Yemen. It gave incentive for countries, I mean, like the Gaza, for instance, the resistance in Gaza, and even the Saudis and the Emiratis, for instance, who are very much on the U.S. bloc, but they decided to resist U.S. Pressures, heavy U.S. pressures to increase oil production and bring the price of oil down. After the Ukraine war, they went with the Russians on this. And more countries have seen that there are not consequences for partnering with another bloc. I mean, Joe Biden could do nothing when the Saudis and Emiratis said, "Nah, we're going with the Russians on this." Donald Trump won't be able to do anything when his big allies in the region decide to do that. They're now acting in their own self-interest because on certain matters that are important to them, okay, because they perceive another bloc in the world. So they're able to expand their horizons and react to their own interests in a whole different way than when it was a unipolar world. So the big picture is, regardless of all these wars and aggressions and tragedies taking place in the world, it's happening where the unipolar bloc, right, is not in a place of victory. It's in a place of panic. All right. Even if the Americans and Israelis and Emiratis, because there's no Arab and Muslim state more determined to wipe out Gaza than the Emirates. If these guys manage to clear out Gaza, do a full ethnic cleansing, it won't stop there, because at the same time, Russia and China continue to rise. We will get to Iran shortly. And there will be another way, another backdoor into Palestine. This will never stop. They can empty out all the territories, but Palestine is an idea that will not go away. All right. Self-determination is an idea that will not go away. It is especially has legs now because there is another block. So as we're watching, from our perspective, catastrophes take place in various theaters, we have to realize the bigger picture is why they're taking place is because the unipolar world is freaking out. Okay. And the gap between China and the US every day, month, and year continues to grow as the US debt grows and Chinese innovation skyrockets. Okay. They weren't able to end Russia, right? NATO, the West, they weren't able to end Russia in the Ukraine war. Russia gained in so many theaters, especially in perception globally. Okay. And I have to say, perception is 100% of politics, is actually why there's so much propaganda from the West. They understand that even if the facts don't benefit them, the perceptions can make them look glorious and victorious and strong. All right. So all I'm saying is, while we're looking at these tragedies, keep your eye on the fact that this is actually the West in panic mode, doing maximum destruction. When empire falls, the beast claws on to relevance in every way it can. This is a desperate beast we're looking at, not a victorious one.
What were you going to say,
Okay.
Karim?
Yeah, I want to say the point is that I agree with Sharmeen, but unfortunately, what the region will benefit from this. Yani if this
Well,
happened before the fall of Bashar al-Assad or before the assassination of Sayyid Hassan, we will see, okay, we will benefit. But currently, if the fall happens and Al Saud rules Saudi Arabia and Zayed
yeah.
rules UAE and Sharia rules Syria, and the pan-Zionist Lebanese are ruling Lebanon, the region will not benefit.
No, you have to look at the long-term picture again in these things. Shada can't, the ground shakes under him every day. Okay, the economy being the big question. As the economy worsens, you're going to have more security issues for the state because
I
people aren't going
understand
to
that,
put
but
up
do
with
you
it.
think if he
But
falls
The Emirates now promising one point something
for
trillion dollars, $1.4 trillion to spearhead AI,
In
Western
the US,
AI.
in the
in
US,
the
yeah.
Yeah,
United States, that's
yeah,
the
yeah.
funny part, yeah.
To thinking that the digital innovation is going to let innovation stay within the unipolar domain is wrong long term. Just like you can't sustain an entire country based off of real estate, as Dubai saw, during certain crashes. You have to look at the long picture on Israel, which looks like it's going from victory to victory. If we have all devastation in this region, the people of this region are not going anywhere. You bide your time, you wait, and then you rebuild. This has happened time and time again over the centuries. This is a civilizational region. It is not a fly by the seat of your pants region. This is not a, oh, let's just declare a state and move on. These people, when borders have changed, the people have not. Um, I don't mind crash and burn in some respects because our systems are archaic. The monarchies are archaic. The governance in even supposedly democratic countries that hold elections are corrupt and useless. Crash and burn may be how you see the emergence of new political parties and new political movements, all right? But these would operate outside of a unipolar world where they didn't have USA dollars to give left, right, and center, right? There are many opportunities in chaos. You just have to have efficient players to take advantage of those vacuums. And we do have that efficiency in the region. There have been some losses, but I keep repeating what Nasrallah said, but I'm sure others have said. I'm sure the old warrior philosophers of uh, you know ages past have also said there are battles that can be lost, but a war can still be won, you know?
True.
We have to remember that. We're not going anywhere. And, again, watch Israel. Literally, 70% of Israelis don't trust Netanyahu. This is with his new purging of Gaza. This is with his new aggression, which tends to divert national attention and get national support unified around war. 70% of Israelis do not trust Netanyahu. The frog continues to boil. The very premise in terms of national security at the onset of the Zionist state, okay, David Ben Gurion's words, his strategy was that Israel can only afford short, fast, hard wars. This is the longest war the state has ever endured. And every day the state continues. Netanyahu keeps insisting war on 7 fronts. We're just looking Gaza, the West Bank, and Lebanon and occupation of Syria. War on 7 fronts for him. The more Israel's economy becomes um, morphs into something that is no longer recognizable. The state economy, the state structures, the state resources, the mobilization of people, politics, economics, social structures is all towards war. This state is falling apart in its own way. Okay. All the frogs are being boiled, the American frogs, the Israeli frogs, even the Emirati frogs. I mean, $1.4 trillion, is crazy, right? And then that's not including the billions for like the Saudis building Neom, their city, and the billions that the Gulf countries are going to be expected to spend to finance America's war on Yemen, and the billions are going to have to spend to create this, diversionary road from India through the Gulf to Israel. They are hemorrhaging money on projects that are as much meant for the optics as they are for reality, because we don't know if they're actually manifest. You know, 1.4 trillion on US AI What do you think? The Chinese are not going to view that as
and
an Emirati threat? You think the
uh,
Chinese are not going to do it on a dime? What do they think?
and
Let them bleed their money.
BlackRock is among the
The
companies that
investors.
will take part of this
Well,
1.4
and
trillion
and and
dollars.
watch the quiet little wars. BlackRock was just booted out of a bid for a Panama, a port in Panama by the Chinese. The
They were.
Chinese said, we're not going to sell to you. You're out of the bidding. Yeah, because they know BlackRock is an instrument of the security state in the US, and they said
Hmm.
no. And so there are a lot of instruments. And I mean, this is why the Cradle was created, to talk about the things that nobody sees in English.
Hmm.
You know, did you know that the Chinese decided with a swipe of the pen that BlackRock was out of the running for having a port, an established port in Panama? These are all important little side side games that are being played in the big game, right? The great game, that nobody pays attention to. But this is why the Russians, the Chinese, and the Iranians don't rush on their solutions. They want everything done properly. You have to sometimes string things out in order to see the commitment of your negotiating partners, right? That it's not just sound bites, right? That they're not just eager because they want an optic for their domestic, populations and for headlines, that there's a real commitment there. These players are not acting frantically. It's the unipolar players that are the most frantic on the global stage today. That's the big picture.
So let's go back to what you said, Charmaine. Israel and its 7 war fronts. At this point, there's hardly any of them really. You could call them war because only one of these fronts is attacking Israel currently, and that is Yemen, right? But that is not the war that the Israelis are fighting directly, and we'll get into Yemen in a second. But as you said, they are completely back in full force in Gaza, committing, atrocities. I was just talking to Karim earlier today about how it's incredible that nearly a year and a half into this genocide, they still find ways to surprise you. They still find ways to disgust you and to make you think, how is this even possible? They reopened their front in Lebanon. Last week they bombed Ahia. They bombed the suburbs of Beirut. They destroyed this building located between 2 schools, creating chaos and panic over some rocket launches in the border that the Lebanese army says were conducted by a bunch of civilians, some Syrians, some Lebanese, obviously blamed on Hezbollah, even though Hezbollah was the first to come out and say we didn't do it. They've been bombing Syria. And obviously Iran, right? The big prize at the end of the road for the Israelis. Yesterday, Donald Trump comes out and says, well, first of all, the Iranian foreign ministry says we have handed our response back to Oman to give to the U.S. Over Trump's letter to Khamenei, right? And the response, essentially, what they've told us says is we are ready for indirect talks. We're ready for indirect talks. We are not ruling out talking to the E3, that is the UK, Germany, and France. On their nuclear program, the IAEA is set to go back to Iran again in a few days. Rafael Grossi is expected to due back in Tehran. But what does Trump come out and say? He says, if they don't make a deal, there will be bombing. There's a chance that if they don't make a deal, that I will do a secondary tariffs on them like I did 4 years ago. But obviously the main thing, there will be a bombing, right? He is threatening to attack Iran directly. We've seen a lot of movement of U.S. warships and U.S. Warplanes in the Indian Ocean being deployed, B-52 bombers, F-35 fighter jets deployed to the the Garcia base in the Indian Ocean, which is this air base run by the UK, by the Brits. We've seen a lot of movement also. These OS intelligence sites are recording, refueling planes moving to the east coast, I'm sorry, of the US, maybe to be deployed. There's apparently more aircraft carriers heading to the region. Yemen has not backed down. Yemen has continued continue to attack despite, hundreds of strikes by this point that Yemen has suffered at the hands of the U.S. Across its many cities. Yet they still fire hypersonic missiles at Ben Gurion Airport, at the USS Truman. They say they engaged the USS Truman multiple times over the weekend, that they're forcing it out of the water. I want to get your thoughts on this, Charmaine, and this is mainly because you haven't been with us for the past few weeks. I know you have your opinion on the Trump in particular is that he might run out of patience eventually, right, with all of these continuous expansion. But it doesn't seem like that's what he's standing for, right? It feels like he's very willing, very ready to just continue to expand wars, and in particularly against Iran. There doesn't seem to be any sort of middle ground to be found here, right? He's saying you either do a deal like soon in the next few weeks, or we're going to bomb you.
Well, we're early days into the Trump administration,
2 months.
and I think we need a few months when once wars have initiated, and as they have in Lebanon and Gaza again, and on Yemen, we need a few months for him to realize that he's not winning. Okay, bad information's coming out. This ain't making me look good, and then we'll see where Trump goes with it. Okay, cut his losses, blame it on someone else, etc. We have a feature coming out today on why Trump's going after Iran, and it basically argues that he's doing this for it's posturing, it's for optics, it's he has a vendetta, right? That we have all seen with Joe Biden, with Barack Obama. He wants to do the opposite of what they're doing, right? And he wants to show them that I'm better, that I'm the greatest, that I made this happen. I'm the champion. And he also comes in with an idea that America first means actually more than we thought. It means America gets to grab hold of the part of the world it wants to keep. Panama is a strategic route. Greenland has strategic resources. Ukraine has strategic resources. He's going specifically for, resource grabs because Canada, absolutely, fled with resources. So these aren't just random countries. They all have, this is more strategic thinking than I've ever seen from Trump, ever. Okay. Where Iran's concerned, however, it is more because Iran's an easy target for him. He doesn't understand the country. He doesn't understand the thinking. He doesn't understand the civilization. He, in his mind, it's a shithole country, and you can bomb shithole countries and nobody can do anything about it. Iran is also a taster for him to see how Russia and China will react, right? Because both have now signed strategic long-term agreements with Iran, okay? Propelling Iran to the top position of all states strategically for China and Russia in West Asia. And we know this from a few years ago when Iran became the first West Asian state to be accepted by the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is more defense security oriented than BRICS, for instance, right? There are only 9 members of that. No West Asian country besides Iran. Every member of the SCO has the right to veto anyone else. Iran can veto every other player in West Asia. Okay, they can play with them in the BRICS, the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Egyptians, etc. But the SCO is Iran. So this is a bit of a test. Trump can't go after Russia and China, and he doesn't want to. All right, that's definitely not on his on the docket for him. But Iran, let's see how that goes. He doesn't rate it much. He doesn't understand it at all. He certainly doesn't understand the complexities of Iran's response because, and I think he's been emboldened by the fact that Iran's Operation True Promises were not, at least in his mind, significant, right? He thinks Iran is afraid. Iran will be even more fearful given that, given the degradation of its resistance axis allies in Lebanon, in Syria, and in Palestine. Of course, this is where Netanyahu wants to expand the war. He, out of the 7 wars that he tried to push the US to get involved with, Iran's the only one left, right? There's Sudan, there was Libya, there was Iraq. We've been through all of these.
Lebanon.
Iran's
Hmm.
the only one left, right? So this is the only this is his last window in his mind, right? And he's got Trump in. And so Trump is doing this more as a slap to Obama and Biden. He thinks it's an easy target. In his mind, they didn't do much after he assassinated Soleimani, the Quds Force commander, in Iran's Quds Force commander. Even though he conveniently forgets that Iran did the a historic reaction, which was to launch 24 ballistic missiles into US bases,
Hmm.
okay, and cause those headaches, right?
The
Uh,
traumatic brain injuries, right?
Traumatic
Traumatic.
brain injuries, right? Which I'm sure were much worse than that. People probably even died, and we're just not going to ever hear it. So he conveniently forgets that, thinks that Iran is easy pickings, and I think he will get a surprise. Part of me, and I'm definitely not a warmonger, back in 2013 when Obama was threatening Syria, I almost wished he would go ahead because I fear the slow, long bloodletting of states more than I do the fast, quick aggression. Okay. I would like to see an Iranian response that puts everybody on notice in the Persian Gulf, in the Levant, the Americans, NATO, everybody. I would like to see that. And I think that would flip the switch and the script entirely for the Americans, for the Israelis, for all the warmongers now. We're not gonna have an end to these threats and assassinations and sabotage and whatever. We're not gonna have an end to them unless there's a decisive action by the US's opponent.
Hmm.
Iran,
Karim.
as it is, will want to avoid that,
Mhm.
strategic patience, etc., for as long as possible. But I'm sure in Iran there is alternative thinking happening since Hezbollah's secretary general was killed, etc. That maybe we just didn't take into account the nastiness, the lack of morality, etc., of the enemy. And now we have to rejig our thinking. Hopefully, Iran has a strategic response that
Mhm.
will meet these threats and put them to rest once and for all.
Karim, why don't you give us your thoughts, considering 2 things. Over the weekend, the IRGC releases this video of a missile city, right? This underground city
Yeah.
just full of missiles. And then yesterday, the Tehran Times comes out with this headline that says that information received by the journalist says that Iran's missiles are loaded onto launchers in all underground missile cities and are ready for launch. What do you think, Karim? What do you think of Sharmin's perspective and, well, what's been happening or what the Iranians say they've been doing?
هلا first the American-Iranian war is the war that everybody wants. Yani people that hate Iran, they want to see it being bombed by the United States, and the people that are with Iran wants Iran to be bombed to see the reaction of Iran. Regarding the videos, I am immune to propaganda. We saw many videos from Hezbollah from underground. Unfortunately, they didn't use them, and we didn't see anything from Israel. We didn't see their weapons, but they used everything. So I don't care about the footages. We want to see actions. It depends how the United States might bomb Iran. Yani, there is many options, and I wonder how they will attack Iran if they want to attack Iran. But of course, it's highly likely because first Trump was the only one who took the decision to assassinate Soleimani, as Sharmin said. And if we go back to 2 weeks and check the signal chat that happened, the
Mm.
leak that happened, you can see how they think. They don't think that as normal people. They don't think as politicians. Yani for instance,
They think as
you,
fanatics,
yeah,
as
you can see. Yani I think I forgot who said it, but somebody said in that chat, "Oh, nobody care about Houthis." So as
they
we
don't
saw on
care.
that on the signal chat, يعني, they might talk to each other and said, "Who cares about Iran? People will be happy. Let's bomb, bomb it." They are not thinking strategically as a country.
And by
So
the way, just to read the quote, I think you're referring to, it was Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth who said, quote, messaging this to the public will be tough no matter what. Nobody knows who the Houthis are, which is why we need to keep the messaging focus on one, Biden failed, and two, Iran funds them, right? So
Iran.
again, this appeals to Trump. The series of messaging on Signal, you saw everyone going back to Trump. In this administration, nobody's trying to hide things from Trump. Everyone's trying to placate and please Trump,
For
right?
sure.
And make sure he understands he's the center. They all understand he's the center. He's the main guy, as opposed to in term one. And the fact that this is being sold as Biden failed, we're going to succeed, they literally, there's no strategy there. It's all about optics. Everything that's happening in regard to Iran is about optics. And
Mhm.
you cannot do a war without a strategy. You cannot.
Philly,
yeah, but
do
that's
you have
why
anything
the
else?
Americans they think they are, and Trump thinks that they are superiors, in a level that nobody can do anything.
Because he
So
underestimates Iran. They're just Muslim. They're just brown. They're a shithole country. They don't. I think smarter strategists around with him who do want the war probably, I assume, looking to see how the Chinese and Russians will react to understand the depth of that strategic relationship.
Allah, for
But by the way, if the Russians and Chinese do nothing and Iran gets attacked,
they will
that
do nothing.
actually weakens them more substantially than anything we've seen so far. Taiwan, Ukraine, etc.
Yeah, they will do nothing 100%.
Okay, we can look at this and see where it
Yeah,
goes.
Russia, which is like the mother of the multipolar. When you think multipolar, you think about Russia or maybe the Soviet Union. It ended a war, and China didn't do anything. If you go and check what the officials in China said, they said that they are against the war, and China should not, and Russia should not do this. On the other hand, you see the Westerns ally how they act. Latvia, which
I
has
don't
like
I
2
don't
million
consider that.
population, they gave weapons. Yeah, and they had the balls to give weapons. So let's go back to the main point. So I think I was just researching today at the morning, and how the United States might bomb Iran. If they bombed it from, for instance, the Indian Ocean through like
Diego Garcia,
USS
the base.
carriers,
By the way, Kenny, make sure not to give them ideas, okay? You're probably smarter than those guys over there.
hopefully. So I think if they bombed Iran from the Indian Ocean, it's very difficult for Iran to retaliate because everybody is waiting for Iran, for instance, to bomb like American bases in the region. And if they were not used, I don't think Iran will bomb like a base in Saudi Arabia and UAE or Qatar if it was not used. So they can corner Iran in that way. Unless they used Iraq, I think the United States can do whatever it wants in Iraq. They might use Iraq to bomb Iran, but this will be they will might make themselves vulnerable. So that's what I think. I think they can bomb Iran from either the Indian Ocean or maybe even from the Mediterranean. And they will not give to Iran many choices because if Iran retaliates in a base within other countries, nobody will agree with that. You know what I mean? They will create more enemies.
For sure.
So we have to wait and see. I did also some research. The United States can use F-35s, F-22s, or F-16s because they have long range missiles and they have long range and they can bomb Iran outside from its borders, outside of the 400-kilometer range that Iran uses. For instance, the S-400, they can down the airplanes of the Americans, but they might down missiles. But also, these missiles will not make significant damages. If the United States want to inflict significant damages to Iranian infrastructure, they have to use bombers. And these bombers and the 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000 pounds bombs, you have to drop it from within the country's border. And if you want to bomb a site, you have to be like above
Above.
the site. So here, I don't know if the United States will use this because we saw in the media and the hype is that they are like moving their bombers. I think if the United States wants to bomb Iran, they will use F-16s and F-22s. I don't know if they will use F-35s because one of them might fall while going to Iran. So we'll see what will happen.
But you know, with Ukraine in play and how that affected energy prices, for instance, not just energy prices, food prices, all consumables. You take out Iran, right? And what is it, like second, third? I think second gas, biggest gas reserves in the world, major oil producer. What are you going to do to the price of energy, the price of consumables across the board, everywhere in the world? This is not going to go well. You take out, I don't know, 7 missile cities because now you have the data. Okay, for sure, Iran will get surprises. They didn't know, the Americans, the Israelis, etc., knew this stuff, right? But how big is Iran compared to little Israel? How vast is it? For sure, they will have other missile cities. Like they can't even destroy Gaza and the resistance in Gaza. And they're going to go for civilizational Iran, which, by the way, will unite every single Iranian, including those in diaspora, except the few pro-Shah people who would like to see Iran destroyed. Literally everyone, okay? The million Iranians in LA, New York, etc., Virginia, Washington, it will unite everyone against the US and for Iran and for Iran's security and its borders, etc. It's kind of like Iranian Americans watching the World Cup, you know, when Iran and the US square off. They're always cheering for Iran, secretly, if not overtly. Like, there is going to be, forget the military ramifications, what Iran can do. We cannot even guess at that. We don't know, right? Right, Karim? But the things that will emanate from this war will be so extraordinary. And just as I think, don't forget, Europe gets 40% of its oil through these straits. Not the Americans, but the Europeans.
So you're assuming Iran might close the Strait of Hormuz?
No, I'm assuming that if there's actual active warfare, not one strike, but active warfare, the passage of transportation, vessels, etc., will come to a halt. You know, insurance companies won't take on the risk, etc. Everything, there are ramifications all across the board, and they will reverberate far and wide. So I'm saying, where the Americans, even if they have a really smart plan that nobody could foresee, the ramifications will not only be military, and we don't know what those are, okay, but will be economic in a massive way. And it will impact Europe, and suddenly Europe becomes poorer overnight. So poor from COVID, poorer after Ukraine,
and now even
more destitute after a war in the Persian Gulf. So, you know, and that is going to split Europe away from the Americans even more. There are unforeseen consequences that for sure Trump, with his very non-strategic mind, his very seat of his pants, of his pants kind of mind, is not considering. And that's also, you know, Karim, when I say Russia, what will Russia and China do? That's what the smarter policymakers will be looking at. I'm not talking about the Russians and Chinese jumping into a war to defend Iran at all. They didn't have to do that.
Even by statements, they didn't, Sharmeen.
No, hold on. What happens if there's war? What's going to happen to the Security Council? What's going to happen to the United Nations? You know, everybody's going to react to this. This is not a small conflict anymore. And it has nuclear ramifications. The most notable of all is that it could, the biggest unintended consequence is to force Iran to become a nuclear state. And then Trump's just literally lost.
As far as Europe, so as far as you just said about Europe, I think it's good to remember what was said also in those signal chats, that Waltz, I think Mike Waltz says, "Oh, I hate bailing out Europe," and they just start
Mm.
trash talking
Yeah.
Europe there in that chat. What do
Yeah.
they mean by that? Because it's exactly what you just said, that
Mm.
the Yemeni blockade of the Red Sea doesn't affect the United States; it affects Europe. It affects
Mm.
Europe economically and in energy matters. As far as turning popular opinion against the U.S. If attacking Iran, you know, we have seen something very, I don't know if it's unexpected, but definitely, you know, sickening from the US, and that is the persecution of anyone who opposes genocide, right? Like any anti-genocide protester or activist, if you're a foreigner, you're getting emails saying you need to self-deport. If you were a legal resident, you're also getting arrested by ICE on the street. We saw multiple times. We saw, of course, Mahmoud Halil. We saw the Turkish student, we saw the Iranian student, we saw the Korean student, just like one after the other. So if they start a war with Iran and there starts to be like some movement in the US, then we can just expect that this is going to just continue to expand, right?
Yeah,
To
but the
silence,
fascism, the security state, it's all coming. I mean, whether in Israel, in the US, in the UK, in Germany, you know, in all these countries, the real face of fascism is emerging. The fact that these are security states, they don't care about their citizens, they don't care about, you know,
yes.
the quality of life, etc. And you know, really, when I say it is the American frog that's boiling, it really is the American frog that's boiling, and these are, you know, in the words of Condoleezza Rice, the birth pangs of a new America, the birth pangs of a new world order.
Mm.
Um, and the reason the Americans, you have to understand, are not victorious, no matter if they win little battles along the way, is because of how much it is destroying their way of life, their economies, their freedoms, you know,
Listen,
their democracy, their security.
and it's for Israel, and it's for a foreign nation.
Well,
Like, let's be.
I think without seeing U.S. as carrying carrier being burned or a U.S. Plane being shut down, nothing will affect the United States. Even a war in Iran, because a war in Iran will benefit the United States economically. Sorry,
Because all of a
because
sudden they
a
can
war
sell
on
more of their
Iran will
oil.
benefit the United States economically, unless the war is like as they did in Iraq, if they want to put boots on the ground. But I don't think they will, and they will not even think about it. Because now, currently, the United States is the biggest exporter of oil, and if the oil prices goes up, uh,
They
the United
benefit.
States can easily sell them to any country in the world, with
Yeah.
higher prices. And they will say, of course, Trump will say, we have the best oil, we have the best engineers, we have the purest oil, blah, 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 as they are doing with gas.
Well, we'll have to see. We'll have to see because I don't know. Wait, let
We
me
have
rethink
to
that.
see, and
For
if Iran wants to retaliate, send 10 missiles with 10 UAV drones to show us the missiles. This is very important, because that's what's happening with
mm,
Yemen. Yemen, okay, me, you, Sharmin, and the people in the region understand what Yemen is doing. But because there's lack of footage, people are not understanding what's happening. People are not understanding that there's a poor, small country that is bombing the U.S. Navy. People
This is exactly right.
should see, we should see this.
This is why they think they're victorious, because
Yes,
perception is
yes.
100% of
They control
politics.
the media and the
But
propaganda.
but are they victorious tangibly? My argument is no. My argument is that they're collapsing, and these are the birth pangs of the unipolar collapse. And we're going to see that increasingly. These little wins, I mean, you can destroy everything with enough bombs, right? But the American economy will collapse if they have to go into protracted war themselves directly. Imagine what they're going to have to, the weapons that they're going to have to move away, not from Ukraine, which will be getting zipped, but even Israel, okay? Leaving Israel more vulnerable. And maybe that's when his comes back, you know, and breathes life into what we haven't seen so far, right? Retaliatory strikes. But the amount of weapons the US will have to turn towards Iran, and who's going to put it? I mean, the UN Security Council is not going to make this okay. People are now talking about sanctioning countries like Israel at the UN Security Council Not possible with the US there. But what if the UN just goes, I mean, there's nothing left to the UN charter and something new emerges in another capital. I mean,
Wouldn't
we
wouldn't it
know
be
that
more?
seismic changes are going on, but every one of America's actions and its allies' actions has unintended consequences. Your
Okay.
enemy today, as opposed to before when it just took hits, is no longer lacking agency, no longer lacking efficiency, no longer lacking resources to respond.
In your
Yeah,
guys'
exactly.
mind, let me just jump in very quickly, Karim,
Yeah,
because I
it's only
wanna
one sentence,
go ahead. Go
not a
ahead.
point. So we often say that Americans, they live in a bubble. This bubble
Mhm.
has layers. One of the layers is to show them that they can be hit, because the Americans think that we are superior and we can't be hit. Nobody can touch us.
Yeah.
When you start like bursting these bubbles, everything will
Mm.
change.
Yeah.
Hence the traumatic brain injuries, right? When 20 ballistic missiles rain on a base. What I was going to ask you guys is about what Sharmin was saying, right? About the UN Security Council, because one of the many things that Trump has put on the table is withdrawing from the UN. And again, let's look back at how long has Trump been back in power? It's been just over 2 months. My God, it feels like, I hear like so many things have happened. It's incredible to even consider that has been that short of a time span, but he still has so much time left, right? And I know yesterday he said that he might run again for office, that there are ways for him to return to the ballot, etc. I don't know, I don't think that that's likely at this point, at least. But if this is still his second term, his last term in office, what does he have to lose at this point? He can do any of these things. Didn't he pull out of the WTO a few days ago? He stopped paying for the World Trade Organization the dues, and now he's
Yeah, but
talking about.
look
Go
at the
ahead.
US isolation after just 2 months of Trump being in there. I mean, it's a no-brainer for opponents of the unipolar order. Like Trump is just, manna from the heavens. In one respect, I mean, he's chaotic, which is the downside, but you had a rock solid American establishment before, war establishment before, and now you have someone who's compulsively changing positions is way better than a rock solid war establishment in the US, especially one who draws such global censure and outrage, and isolates the US. I mean, we're going to get to a point, I believe, if he doesn't sort of back down from all these threats and completely change gears, where he's going to quickly advance the deterioration of the dollar as a trading currency, right? Which is what he's warned against. Even before he came to office, if you dump the dollar in your international trades, I'm going to come after you. He's going to trigger this more than anything. You know, it is
But
literally
Sharmin, the point is there is no alternative. If there was alternative, I will tell you 100%. But there's no alternative.
there is an alternative. We have a multipolar world. The multipolar world has not taken shape yet in many forms. It is only, I think it's past the nascent stages. Like now we know there's a rock solid multipolar world. But they're in the nascent stages. They've done the plans of replacing all global networks, from telecommunications to insurance to shipping, transportation, finance, banking, messaging systems. All of these things have now had a few years of development. We have alternative, like the Asian Development Bank. We have, the alternative to the IMF, the
Yeah, I
alternative
know.
to the
Maybe it will take time, but for instance, for me, I am against the U.S. government and the U.S. hegemony. But even if I did something and somebody wants to, for instance, send me money from I don't know, Philippines, I would tell him
Mm.
send them in dollars. You know what I mean? Yani,
Mhm.
there's no other alternative till now. When there's alternative, I will go to it. But still, I think it might take decades for the perception of the people. Well, okay, I can open a bank account overseas, but not in dollars. Still, nobody
Okay, but
nobody thinks about this.
the
And for instance,
reality.
Visa and credit card, you have to have an American credit card to go, and you can buy all over the world. There's no company that matches this, that has like
No system, yeah.
a system that, okay, I have money in Lebanon, I give me a credit card and I can buy whatever I want across the world. There's no such system.
But don't
People
forget,
should push for this. I move this, but unfortunately now there's no other option, I
no,
think.
Karim. even the US government has done a huge thrust since the beginning of Trump's term to buy gold in quantities unheard of. Okay. Trump
True.
is pushing digital currency, digitalization, moving away from the dollar in any which way is going to impact the American economy
Yeah,
in a
of
big
course, of
way.
course.
The European countries are also moving towards digital currencies. So are the BRICS countries. So are Russia and China, certainly Iran. Not necessarily digital, but like commodity-backed currencies. And all of these things, I mean, the Americans are undermining their own financial system by saying they know the dollar is going to go. So they're trying to be the ones to replace it. But in fact, everyone's trying to replace it at the same time. It's like when, the smartphones became popular and suddenly you had 20 models from 20, it's not 20 models, but 20 different companies offering 5 different models each come to the market. All of a sudden, it's like everyone's trying, there's no winner. And that's going to take a while. And there's going to be extreme pushback to stop the Americans from being the winner. Now, the Emiratis, for instance, are betting heavily on American AI being the dominant setters of AI policy reach globally, right? The AI network of the world, like the finance networks, the transportation, telecommunication networks of past years, the AI network, which is transformational, military, security, economic, etc., will be in American hands. The UAE is on a race to help the Americans get there.
Just to give more information, the UAE wants to invest $1.4 trillion in NVIDIA and in BlackRock and in Microsoft. And Walid bin Talal, also from Saudi Arabia, put billions of dollars with Elon Musk for X or the Gork AI. So
Grok.
the Gulf countries are funding this, unfortunately. And during the Eid, where the United States were bombing Yemen and killing civilians, and the Israelis killing civilians, and they gave money to the United States, which is headed now by Trump, who's we all know he hates Arabs and Muslims. يعني يعني
Yeah. Funny story what
it's
happened.
crazy. Me as an Arab, it's crazy. يعني give money under the table. Don't put it like this in my face.
I
It's so
asked
bad. It's so bad.
a couple of days ago, I asked Grok, why has Al Qaeda and ISIS never attacked Israel? I'm still waiting for the answer. It's been
Yeah.
like 2 days, and absolutely no answer. So I think that's what you can expect from a US-led
Yeah, but
AI system.
look at where we're at as of just a few months ago. The new technology innovation of the world that is about to transform the world is no longer in US hands anymore. It has a neck and neck competitor in China.
It's an arms race, essentially.
Yeah, but they're neck and neck. That just didn't exist for decades. They're neck and neck, and the Americans were stunned by that development. And we still don't know. We still don't know. So of course, when you invest in American companies, the reason it took the Americans billions to build their big AI launches, and then it took the Chinese $20 million to do the same, is because they lack efficiency, and the U.S. system, the U.S. runs a system of finance capitalism. They're perfectly happy moving money between Walid bin Talal and Elon Musk and the heads of BlackRock and all these big tech companies. And the F-35 program, and even though everyone thinks it's garbage, that's how they stay afloat.
And
They're
by
so
bullying,
inefficient.
Charmin,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
they
But
bully
they're
other countries.
do you know how inefficient these bubbles are? Just moving money around where innovation is not the key. It's by showing quarterly gains because, it's like you got to grow. Otherwise, you're nothing in America, right? That's economic growth, growth, growth. That's the only thing people want to hear because it's stock markets related. It's finance capitalism. They're not going to innovate smartly because it is just about moving money. We're going to see the flip switch. No, the switch, sorry. We're going to see the switch flip on this AI race. And suddenly you have the new networks of the world governed by new places. And really, I don't, my feeling, I'm sorry that I appear optimistic to everybody. I recognize and always have that battles can be lost. I absolutely reject any notion that any war has been won by the Americans, the Israelis, and their allies. I think they are in free fall. Okay, I'm sorry y'all don't see that, if y'all don't. I think you have to realize that the Americans have met their match, and that the Europeans are broke and the American dollar will not continue to hold, and that there are efficient new players on the global scene that are setting new standards. Just those few points show that we're in the early stages of the battle. I mean, of the war. We're in the early stages of the war.
Yes,
These are just battles, okay?
I
And if
agree
you
with you there.
cannot see who's going to win long term, okay, the only thing that can make the multipolar world collapse and the unipolar world still remain, even if it's by hooking its talons into something, is a preemptive nuclear strike that takes the other side by surprise. And then we're at the end of the world, so who cares?
So I think all of this is obviously topics that are going to continue to evolve, to develop. And I do agree with you, Charmaine, particularly in the point that this is just starting. This is the beginning, right? It feels like this war has been going on for way too long at this point, but everything so far really feels like table setting. And that is a bit harsh to say, to be honest, considering what has been happening in the Gaza Strip, where yesterday was Eid Mubarak to everyone who celebrated as well. We saw multiple massacres, dozens of people killed, on top of obviously the fact that there's no food for people to even break their fast there anymore. A few days ago, Haaretz comes out with this report that says in this attack, the historic attack on the 18 March, which essentially collapsed the ceasefire, only 7 Hamas fighters were named among 436 Palestinians killed that day. And since then, it's been an average of 100 Palestinians getting killed by day, nearly half of them, or actually more than half of them, women and children. Hamas has said that they accepted an Egyptian proposal for a ceasefire, but are being very clear that their weapons are not up for grabs. The resistance and its weapons are an existential matter for us as a people under occupation. These were the words of Hamas leader Bassem Naim from yesterday. We know that the Israeli occupation wants Hamas to fully disarm, on top of all of their other demands as for a ceasefire. And well, we know what Hamas has said. We also, last week, Israel assassinated the top political leader of Hamas. And the movement announced that they would not name a replacement, essentially saying we are willing now to give up control of the Gaza Strip. At this point, I think most of what could be asked of Hamas is already on the table. By them, they are ready to accept most of the terms, except for the arms, except for the disarmament. But on the other hand, the Israeli war machine is just rolling along with absolutely no interest in slowing down. Netanyahu is using this to cover his ass. The investigations around him are just getting worse. Now he's facing the Qatargate scandal, which his closest aides are getting arrested one after the other. He's facing a popular mobilization. He's facing, it does feel like the ground is shrinking around him. But if we know anything about Netanyahu, is that this
Frogs
man,
being boiled.
the frogs being born. In any case, there was. I feel like when we talk about Gaza, sadly, it's just a list of horrific stuff, right? Like just how much horrible can it get? Well, you just give the Israeli army another day, and they will show you. So, having said that, I don't know if you guys have any thoughts about what's happening
I,
in Gaza and in the West Bank as well.
yeah, I mean, right now we have information, of course. I think, Kenny, we were talking about a map that you showed me earlier of the West Bank being carved up. Okay, while the U.S. bloc is backing in the region. Okay, so like the Arab slaves are backing slaves slash monarchies are backing the Palestinian Authority, maybe taking control of Gaza, etc. They're blissfully watching Israel further carve up the West Bank into Jews-only areas, undermining the Palestinian Authority's authority. So it's just all a shit show on that front. We have an article coming out tomorrow on what's happening in Gaza, and it does also touch on the West Bank. Back to the issue of perceptions, there is a perception as of Israel's recent assaults on Gaza, like massacres in Gaza, and killing of some senior Hamas officials, that Hamas is suddenly, not after 15 months of war, but suddenly over the course of a week, vulnerable and collapsing. Okay. And this perception is being spun. And actually, a lot of commentators who are fairly decent writing about it are now writing with this sort of dispirited, Karim like, you know, we've lost everything mood. And, I just want to say why perception is so important. It has actually galvanized the worst players on the Arab stage, which is, let's say, that position is won by far by Mohammed bin Zayed, uh, the Emirati leader, who is the caricature, the absolute epitomization of the caricature of the ugly Arab, the ugly Muslim, the crook, the liar, the traitor, all in one. I mean, he even looks like that. He looks like the bad
Tell
caricatures.
us how
Okay,
you really feel.
let's put his picture up there, okay? Because he looks like it, he looks like
Haven't
the
you seen
things that
the?
anti-Semites draw, who wait.
Haven't you seen it, Sharmin? There's like a famous artist who drew the devil like 200, 300 years ago, and it's exactly like
Is bin
Muhammad bin
Zayed.
Zayed.
Yeah, but this guy,
Wallah.
this guy who is giving the Americans $1.4 trillion to help them win
The
the AI
AI
race
race.
against China, something that will not go unnoticed in Beijing, by the way, okay, is undermining every single possible Arab plan out there to help Palestinians stay in Gaza, to bring aid into Gaza, because he's sniffing blood, right? He's bought into the narrative of Hamas capitulation. And after, they capitulate after 1 week, not after 15 months. But the Cradle article tomorrow will discuss that even the Egyptians are now telling us and others that the Emirates is making really inappropriate moves that not only threaten Egypt's interests, but are also dead set, more Israeli than the Israelis, in emptying out Gaza. The Emiratis want the ethnic cleansing of Gaza, and, are saying things like, okay, yeah, the PA can rule Gaza, but they're also backing Israeli plans to like cut up the West Bank and Judea is it, and Jerusalem. I mean, really, the Emiratis are going against the grain of the Arab monarchs, meaning Abdullah of Jordan, the Saudis, Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince, etc. Egypt now fears that the UAE is trying to carry out large-scale plans to blow up the Gaza Strip from within, quote, by stimulating protests against Hamas and creating confrontations between the people and the Palestinian resistance. It even amounts, these are Egyptians telling us at the Cradle, it even amounts to Emiratis funding via Israel Gazans who are prepared to take money to demonstrate against Hamas.
This is why the UAE was also trying to dynamite the Arab proposal. Remember the Egyptian proposal that was signed off by the Arab League. The UAE
Yeah.
was behind closed doors trying to destroy it. It's very interesting, honestly, very very interesting. Who knows where things will end up in this case? But sadly, well, the situation in Gaza is just getting worse by the minute, and the situation in the West Bank, as you
Yeah.
said, I mean, it just
I
and
just want to
about it.
say, when you're feeling too Karim like, you have to just pull back,
You have to act.
you have to, no, certainly, but you have to pull back. You act within your means, Karim, okay? And when the timing's right, you have to. I mean, if you're a strategic thinker anyways, you have to pull back and look at the world in the two blocks, okay? The pro-US bloc is attacking, I mean, for the Emiratis, Arabs and Muslims, okay, and even the Jordanians, Saudis, Egyptians, etc., undermining the Palestinian cause from day one. It's a visual one scene that doesn't go unseen anymore, right? They are throwing all. They are also throwing all into this great standoff, this global standoff. At the end of the day, the ones who are in panic mode and aggression mode are the ones who are supposedly winning, And what are they winning? It's not clear to me. Unless you count everything in lives lost. And it's not to say I don't. I don't. I do on a human level. But as a journalist, as a geopolitical analyst, I always look at the big picture. And we just didn't until around 2011. We just didn't have, no, until late 2000s. We didn't have this big picture starting to form around the world. First with the BRICS and the Syrian war, SCO, etc., Asian Development Bank, Russia-China strategic arrangements, best friends, best buddies, taking on sanctions, Ukraine. All these things have happened very fast in the span of political history of the world. And you have to understand that we are in the big game, and you can't look at conflicts in a microscopic way. You have to look at how it impacts big players and how they're likely to move.
Well, and we will continue to discuss this and check into these topics, as Charmaine says. Obviously, many things are going to continue to change. We are just beginning, regardless of all the horrific stuff we have already seen. With that, we want to thank you for joining us this week, and to remind you to please leave a like, to share, to subscribe, to follow us on other social media platforms. You can find us on Telegram and on X, and to please check out our Patreon, where you can become a supporter and help us continue to do the work that we do here at the Cradle. For the Cradle News Roundup, my name is Esteban Carrillo. I have been joined by Karim Shami and Charmaine Narwani.